taking a little bit of time talking about digital content and its role and sort of goals here at TFA and how that impacts our approach to writing it. And then we're going to take a little bit of time to delve into how we can use that content to make sure that our reader is sort of doing what we want them to do. It's sort of one of the primary goals of web content here at TFA. And then we'll chat a little bit about how your writing looks on the web. Since the web is a visual medium, it's always very important to make sure you're sort of writing with that thought in mind. So we'll sort of outline those steps a little bit, how to think about that when you're sitting down to write. And then we'll go into some very deep dive into specific writing tips and a little bit of workflow, and then sort of end with a checklist that you can sort of use moving forward when you're sitting down to write, and making sure that you're kind of hitting all of the steps and producing the best content that you can. And finally, we'll wrap up with some resources that you can sort of use to support and things that we can help you with as you need them as you're creating content. Okay, to sort of kick things off, I just wanted to get everyone chatting and ask a question. If you could chime in the chat box. What is your favorite website and why? Tell us a little bit about it. And we'll give you a few minutes for that. Yes, Airbnb. Good. Nice. Oh, yes. Cappuccino is a good one, too. Yeah, I love all these. All of these are such great examples, too, of, very, visually rich websites, beautiful photography, and, a lot of, visual happenings. I really love these. Oh, yeah, Grantland. That was a great one. Great one. Cool. Cool. Well, these are great. Hopefully, some of the stuff we talk about today, you can sort of think about in terms of your favorite websites, the ones that you visit the most, and hopefully we can start making connections about, between, these sort of writing tips and why you're attracted to these specific websites. So hopefully we'll start to make those connections today. But all right, so start out just to kind of talk a little bit about digital content. I wanted to sort of take a step back and really think about why we're writing web content and how it's sort of different from other types of writing. And I think there are two sort of really important points to consider here. One, we really approach web content as something that provides solutions for your readers. So I like to think of it as your reader has a problem, and the problem has a negative connotation. But in this context, I sort of mean it has an issue or question. The reader has a burning need to know something, and so your content is sort of providing the answer to that and solving this sort of issue or problem for them. So we really strive to make web content sort of answer a question or inform the reader or inspire them in some way, and ultimately make their lives easier, providing them a space where they're able to learn about something in a digestible, easy way. And I think the other really important thing to consider is that all web content at Teach for America includes a desired action from your readers. So once we get the reader to your web content, it's really important that we have an idea of what we want them to do when they get there. Of course, we want them to read it and enjoy it and glean something from it. But I think in order to support your larger digital ecosystem, it's important that you have an idea in mind of what you want them to do next after they read your piece. So we'll talk a little bit more about those actions a little bit later, but I wanted to kind of introduce that and also just kind of point out that both of these points have two very important things in common, which is that they're reader-driven. It really points to the fact that web content is very much based on your audience, what they want and what they need. And I think this really differentiates it from a lot of different other types of writing, as you can imagine, writing that's, more based on the writer's needs, or, in the case of like a newspaper, you're sort of presenting an objective representation of facts in an ideal world. And so there are all these different types of writing, but I think web content is very much driven by your reader and what they want and need. And so we're trying to kind of like provide that for them, make sure that that we're giving them the tools that they need. So thinking about the reader, who is your reader? Who is our reader here at Teach for America? And at Teach for America, on the national team, our digital strategy is based first. So our readers are prospects, core members, alumni, and staff. And I think each audience within our base has very different needs, obviously. So I think it's essential to sort of assess all web content, whether you're writing something new or whether you're editing existing content, with a particular audience within our base in mind, and write for that audience. But admittedly, it is sort of tricky to figure out exactly what your audience wants. We're obviously not mind readers, so how we do that is we look at the data, which is like our favorite thing to talk about. And so we really listen to what our audience is most engaged with. And the way that you can do that is really to refer to your monthly Google Analytics reports, and you can see how your audience is responding to the content that you're publishing. This is important. I think you can look at specific pieces that you've published or web pages and study study user engagement and traffic and time on page on an individual basis. But I think it's also important to look like over time, so you can sort of see how your audience is growing and evolving on your various web pages, over months, and that can really help you sort of drive and define your content strategy moving forward. And I think I have some information here about where our readers are coming from. Obviously, search is a huge source of readership, social media, email, other websites. This is just like a beginning, sort of like a little bit of an introduction of where our folks are coming from. So I wanted to turn now to some specific examples on our properties that sort of show content that's created with specific audiences in mind. So this first example, and I will actually go to the actual web page so we can see it a little bit more clearly here. The first example is from Top Stories, which is our national blog on teachforamerica.org, and this is one of our admissions blogs. So it's written specifically for prospects. It's very practical. It offers very useful tips for prospects who are in the middle of the application process. Some just very clear do's and don'ts. You can see that this is written, this is extremely web-friendly, has very clear headings, and it's brief to the point. And it also provides an action at the end. So in addition to informing the reader and sort of giving them really information that they immediately need, in this case with prospects who are in the middle of their application and need advice, then it also has this action at the end, which is to encourage readers to stay within the fold, visit the applicant center, continue to learn more about the application process, and ultimately just engage with Teach for America, on that next level, keeping them in the fold. So that's an example of sort of prospect-centered web content. And you can see here, we'll talk about this a little bit later as well, but it also has a very sort of web-friendly headline, very short and to the point. And this is just a measurement of the number of page views that it's received over the past, I'd say, year or so. So it's very well trafficked. Most of the traffic comes via search for this. So our next example is from TeacherPop, which is our blog for core members, and it lives on WordPress. I will turn to the web page here. It lives on WordPress, not on teachforamerica.org, and it has very much like a very traditional blog feel to it. So it's reverse chronology, and sort of looks like a typical WordPress blog. And this piece was written specifically for core members and early career new teachers. And this is something that we created for Teacher Appreciation Week. And it's sort of a fun piece, but again, it really, I want to just highlight that it sort of adheres to sort of principles that we really like to highlight and point to for web writing, which is these kind of short sentences, like a lot of white space, clear headers and bold type. And again, there's an action at the end, which is we ask folks to share the article on Twitter with this hashtag, which was created for Teacher Appreciation Week. So again, the content here is really written for new teachers. It's fun, it's lighthearted, but it's meant to sort of engage them and also just to kind of say, like, hey, like, we hear you, we get where you're coming from, like, you're not alone kind of thing, which is sort of the general tone of TeacherPop and supporting core members and new teachers. And again, a very web-friendly headline, and you can see that, that it has some nice traffic as well for this piece. So lastly, I just want to quickly highlight a web page from Greater Philadelphia. This is a little bit different because it's not a blog, it's an actual web page. But one thing that we really love about this page is it's specifically for alumni. So it's written with that specific audience within our base in mind. And it's very clear what we're trying to impart to them, and also like what we're providing for them, what sort of support we're providing for them. Very web friendly again, with lots of white space, bold, clear headers. And here we have another type of action, which is we're asking folks to register for an event, an upcoming event. And the thing that's really great about this is that not only is it really clear, but it has a prominent place on the page, and this button, which is the actual call to action, is very clear. So there's no, it's not hidden. We have a very clear action that we want folks to take. And another nice thing about this page is that there are multiple actions that folks could take. So if they're not interested in the event, they can sort of learn more about getting involved as an alum, or read stories about other alums in their area. So that's just a great example of a web page that's really using these writing principles that are important for the web, and also considering the audience very clearly and encouraging them to take action as well. So yes, huge kudos to Greater Philadelphia. We love this page. So moving along, just to talk a little bit more about the actions that we want our readers to take. So as I said before, with web content, we get the reader to the page, which, we get them there through a variety of means. That can be through search, it could be through social media, it could be through email, and those distribution methods are all very important, and also something to consider when you're writing for the web. But once we get them to our page, it's really important to think about what we want them to do next. Again, it's very important for them to read the piece and engage with it, but we really want them to take that next step so they're sort of part of the Teacher America community, online community, and engaged. So when you're writing a piece, I think it's important from the start to really define that path for them within the content itself. So when you're sitting down to write a blog post, you can sort of think to yourself, okay, this is the audience I'm writing for, and here's what I want them to do once they're finished reading. So if you have that in mind, like from the start, when you're starting to write something, it can really help inform the way that you approach the piece. So you're not necessarily like tacking it on at the end, but it's really like sort of guiding your like writing process. And the great thing is that we can measure every single action that your reader takes on the website through Google Analytics. And this can, you know, be extremely insightful because it helps you really determine whether your strategy is working, whether your reader is sort of, you know, taking the steps that you intend for them to take. And if they aren't, then that can help, you know, help you iterate in the next go round. So these are just some like possible actions that you could steer your reader towards. Apply for the core for prospects, RSVP for an event for alums, donate, sign up for email newsletter, share a story. And then it could also be something like, you know, that's not necessarily like external, but having them stay within your microsite. So reading another like related article on the microsite or learning more about a particular program in your region. So these are just some possible actions. And again, we can measure all of these through data. And these are just some quick examples of different types of actions and the way they look on teachforamerica.org. We have a lot of great plugins that our web team has created, beautiful, such as these down here, which are buttons to encourage folks to apply or make a donation. So this is sort of one type of plugin that you could potentially use at the bottom of your web page or blog post. Another plugin is related stories. I know a lot of you on your regional blogs employ this plugin as well, which is a great way to keep folks within the fold and continuing to read your content. And then you can sort of manually add, which we saw in one of the previous examples, just manually add text at the end of your page to encourage them to do something, in this case, join for a webinar. And this top example is a great example from Dallas-Fort Worth about another like event RSVP action that we really love. So these are just some nice examples from TFA.org. So I just kind of want to wrap up this section just to talk a little bit about when you're sort of evaluating content, especially content that's already on your site or already created that you may possibly are thinking about editing. You know, I think it's a really great to look at it through this lens of these two questions of what does the content solve for the reader and what action does it engender? And I think that those two questions can really help you refine existing content. If you're thinking about, oh, I have these pages and I don't necessarily know where to start in order to, you know, make them more web friendly or edit them, you know, I think these two questions can really help you tackle that. Because if you look at something and you say, you know, this doesn't have an action, you can immediately start to brainstorm, okay, what would I ideally want the reader to do after they visit this page? And I think once you address those things, that can really help you think more, you know, on a bigger level about your larger digital strategy and how that content is supporting it through these 2 points. So just to wrap up this section, I was hoping we could just take a minute to think a little bit about actions and what kind of actions do you hope your readers will take after they read the content on your site. You could just chime in the chat. And this could be anything from, you know, if your region hosts a lot of events, you know, that may be a priority for you to really promote registration for events, or if you have a newsletter and you're trying to boost subscription to that, or, you know, there are all sorts of different actions that folks can take. Yeah, share a story, that's a great one. That's something that we want with probably every case we've gone to, we want folks to share, especially the way our digital ecosystem works these days, where social media is so important. I think that action of sharing really spreads our message in a way that's really special and unique. Yeah, we have other stories. Yeah, these are great. Well, thanks, everyone. All right, so I want to move into this next section, which is going to talk a little bit about web writing and how it appears on the page. Since the web is a visual medium, the reading on the web is really a visual experience. And I think that this is really important when you're looking at writing web content, and it's unique from web design in a way, because it helps you map out your text in a way that's often separate from whatever design like template that you're working in. So I wanted to take a quick moment to sort of like look at how your audience sort of reads on the web, and this is sort of this photo here is based on like eye tracking studies for how folks read on the web. And for both desktop and mobile, I'd say that readers tend to scan and skim. They rarely read every single word on a page, and that's sort of just that sort of the nature of the medium and how people are reading on it. But these eye tracking studies are interesting because they show how the eye really favors the top half of the page, and it follows sort of like the normal sort of the typical left to right pattern of reading at the very top, but then it sort of takes a much more like vertical movement down the left side once it takes that first horizontal past the top. This is especially true on mobile, as you can imagine, which is almost entirely vertical movement of readership. But I think that this is really significant when you're thinking about how you're writing for a number of reasons, which we'll address in a second. But mainly, I think front-loading a lot of your information at the top, making sure your headlines are very strong, and then also really highlighting items on the left side, which we can do like via lists or bullet points, or use of like certain formatting like bold and again like strong little subheads. So moving on, I wanted to pass this over to Teresa, and she's going to talk a little bit more about how we read on the web and how this relates to the web pages on teachforamerica.org as well.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. So do you want me to take control, or you can stay in control, actually. It might be easier for me. So just to like go off of what Marie started to say about the visual experience that we have, if you think through just your own experience of when you're reading an article, like let's say New York Times or any sort of newspaper, whether it's on your phone or on your laptop or desktop, you can think through your actions. You usually just skim the title to begin with, and for the most part, people tend to scroll through the entire page before they actually start to read. So it is just a very visual experience of mentally going through, seeing what is about to happen later on down the page, whether you want to find out how long the article is, or whether there's pictures, or whether there's something to do at the bottom. It's a very interactive visual experience, not so much expecting you to read from the very beginning. So with that in mind, it's important to really make sure that you're giving the opportunity for the user to have that visual experience. So you want to put in headlines and subheaders throughout your content so that as they're skimming through the page, they're seeing breaks in the text, and they're seeing an opportunity to learn more almost without having to read all of the material. You also want to have lists and bolding and bullet points that are breaking up text, so that when people are skimming through, they're seeing an opportunity to almost like pause and focus in on something, as opposed to just being overwhelmed with lots and lots of paragraphs and long sentences. Also having Pictures and white space are also another opportunity to just break up the experience and not overwhelm our readers. So just to think through like how you can do this if you're writing a blog or if you're designing a page on your microsite, like the alumni page that we showed on the Philadelphia microsite. There is, first of all, there's a header with each new pane. So we're basically, when there's a new topic or a new set of information, you're putting a header to summarize what that information is going to be. So really just summarizing and drawing attention to the fact that it's switching topics, and that allows readers to, when they're skimming, focus in on the information that they're most interested in. And then on our site in particular, we use a ton of white space, which really is aligned to our style. You'll notice if you just go to our homepage, there's a lot of white space all over the place. And that's really just to provide a simple, easy to view experience for all of our readers, that they're not overwhelmed with too much information. As soon as they get there, they can very clearly find the action that they want to take or the information that they initially looked for. So I guess all of that to say that it is very visual, and we want you to think a lot about the words that you're actually writing, but as you are writing, it's also really important to think about what it looks like when it's on the page. To provide an example of this, we have this screenshot here is from our How to Apply page, which is from the Tips for Applying, which you can find on the main homepage. And this is a page we recently redesigned because we were finding that a lot of people were coming to our site for information on how to improve their application and just find out more about the application before they actually started it. And so we wanted to make this as simple and user-friendly as possible because people are coming here for a very clear purpose. We don't want to overwhelm them with a paragraph about why it's important to apply to Teach for America and you know, the Teach for America experience or whatnot. We just wanted like straightforward information that's all right away given to them. So you can see that first of all, we use the vertical tab approach here. So there's the resume, application, short answer question tab, so people can clearly click between depending on which item they're looking to improve. And then within this resume tab, there's just a one sentence, like 15-word summary of what you should do on your resume. And then we have bolding and bullet points for the main things that we want people to focus on. So most applicants coming to the site looking for help on their resume, they're going to very easily be able to find this tab, and then they're going to be able to see very quickly, okay, I need to have stuff about my academics, stuff about my leadership, and then, oh, look, there's a link that I can see an example. And there's no other words that you really need. Like, it's a very intuitive experience that people are going to see, okay, I should click on this college senior resume link, and I'm going to be taken to this PDF. So, again, it's really to the point, and it's really just making sure that we're understanding our users' needs and we're not overwhelming them. They can find what they need as quickly as possible. And like Laura Z said in the chat, that it's a really difficult skill to keep your sentences and your paragraphs and all your information as concise and to the point as possible. It almost feels weird when you're writing sentences as short as they need to be, whether it's you know, just on a website or within an article itself or a blog post. We really want things to be no more than 12 or 14 words per sentence because our users just kind of give up and get exhausted if they're reading too much. And if you think about this experience on a mobile device too, this information looks even so much longer when you scale it down into a really narrow space. So we want to keep it as short as possible so that even our mobile users are able to just quickly skim through and not get overwhelmed.
Hey, Teresa and Marie, real quick. Megan asked like a really interesting question in the chat. She was wondering if, Megan, feel free to shout it out too, but wondering if like these tips so far vary between like static web and blog content, but y'all might be getting to that.
Yeah, so I think it's actually important that most of these tips I think apply in both contexts. Obviously it looks different versus an article or a blog article versus an actual website. You're not going to have as many bullet points or links or lists in an article itself versus an actual page, but they are both very visual experiences that you cannot expect the reader to be reading every word. You want to make sure that you have all the information at the top of the page, you're providing actions for users to take, and then you're providing white space. So on a web page, that white space will come in like chunking up information into different panes, but in a blog post, that white space comes from breaking up sentences into several different paragraphs. So it's kind of like a different way of employing the skill, but they are both still necessary, whether it's a website or a blog post, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's get on to the question of skimming websites. And I want you just to think about how you personally read through websites, whether it's on your cell or on your desktop. Which do you prefer, and what sort of things do you do when you're getting, let's say, to an article on your phone or on your laptop? What do you find yourself doing frequently? So I will chime in, and I'll say that I always read the captions on photos. I think that that's something that I always do, whether it's my phone or a desktop. I always read the headers. Yep, and it looks like reading on your phone is easier. Yeah, because a lot of people are getting to articles from social media, which most people are accessing on their phones nowadays. Yeah. Good. Yeah, and so I think just in seeing the phone come up a lot, it's really important for you to think when you are writing blog content to, even if you can, view it unpublished on your phone, or just even view a similar article on your phone and see if you get to like a 500-word article on your phone, you can see how far you have to scroll to get to the bottom versus like a 200-word article versus a 2,000-word article. We really, when we're reading, we really just like to have stuff that is digestible, that we can very easily focus our attention on, whether it's a particular paragraph or it's a particular action or particular photo. It's really important to think through just not overwhelming our users and making sure that they have the energy to get to the content that you want them to get to.
Thanks, Teresa. We're going to sort of move on here to some, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some writing tips here to get into kind of some specifics. So I want to start out with headlines. And I think that, I don't want to say that headlines are the most important thing, but they are a very, very important thing, especially with blog posts. And so I think to start with a headline is pretty critical. And I would also even recommend when you're sitting down to write something, again, this applies more to blog posts, rather than web pages. But I think it can be very useful when you're sitting down to write to think about the headlines first, which is a little bit counterintuitive and probably not the way that you would approach other forms of writing. But I think for the web, it can be really helpful for a number of reasons. It can help drive the content of the post and the presentation of it, but then it also really gets you thinking about like how you're going to be promoting this piece of writing. So if you're thinking about, well, I know that this post is definitely going to go up on Facebook, you can sort of write the headline with Facebook in mind. So there's some kind of principles to keep in mind with headlines, and I think it's always smart to keep them under 10 words, ideally between 6 and 8. That's sort of like the sweet spot, and it's also a good idea to sort of strike a balance between common words and sort of positive emotional language. This can be great too when you're promoting via social media, because we tend to see that emotional language or something that's very inspiring or soaring in a sense can have can really hook the reader and encourage them to click through. Another thing that we've seen a lot of success with is including numbers as well as how or what at the beginning of headlines, again for shareability and to encourage folks to click through to read the piece. So those are just kind of some brief writing tips for headlines, and we have some examples of some successful headlines that were attached to successful posts that generated some good readership. And there's always a little bit of a debate about whether did the headline drive the folks to read it? Did the photo drive the folks to read it? I think they're both equally important, and I think it's definitely well worth the time and effort to spend some thoughtful brainstorming time on headlines, and even coming up with maybe 3 or 4 that you want to sort of experiment with and see what you think sticks with folks. And I think these tips really do apply more to blog posts, but I think there's some things that we can carry over to web pages as well. I think keeping headlines on web pages, keeping them very brief is very important. Being very clear and straightforward is also critical, not only for just the readers, just to sort of respect the reader, but also I think that will be really important too for SEO, which Teresa will talk about a little bit later. And then just thinking a little bit about the style that you're using when you're writing on the web. I think web writing tends to be much more casual than other types of writing. It's conversational in tone. It's positive, engaging, and I think one of the most important things is really to employ plain and simple language on the web, as we sort of talked about earlier. Since folks are largely skimming a lot of the content, having the language be very simple sort of helps them do what they're sort of doing naturally in terms of reading on the web. And one sort of good guide to use for sort of the level of language that you're using on the web is the Flesch-Kincaid score. And I don't know how many folks are familiar with this, but you can easily check it in Microsoft Word after when you're spell checking or checking for grammatical errors. At the end of that session, it will bring up your Flesch-Kincaid score. And it's a good idea for web content to really aim for a 7th grade reading level. That's sort of the kind of industry standard that folks sort of strive for on the web, and that corresponds to a Flesch-Kincaid score of between 60 and 70. So again, just to sort of reiterate what Teresa said earlier, it's having the language be very clear, very straightforward. Not trying to get too dense or too deep for folks, just respecting how our audience is already reading on the web and writing for that. And similarly, we try to avoid using any sort of jargon or insider language. even in our case here at Teach for America, you know, if our audience, you know, we know our audience is our base, but we still don't necessarily want to assume that they're familiar with specific terminology that's either specific to Teach for America or maybe even specific to the education space. So it's, you know, it's we try to encourage folks to either explain terms that they're using in sort of like a clear, like non-patronizing way, or to write in a way where they don't necessarily need to like use very insider terms or jargon. And lastly, we encourage folks to use the active voice. It just creates more like intimacy with the reader. The passive voice tends to create distance and feels a little bit more like institutional. It comes off in that way. So we encourage the active voice. Yeah, I'm just going to pass along now to Teresa to talk a little bit more about length on the web and SEO.
Yep, thanks, Bree. I think we actually already touched on these main points on the length, but again, we want to keep it as short as possible, which is definitely a skill that takes practice. So having a good editor can be really helpful, and somebody who's going to be holding you to the word limits that we have there. So for both web pages and blogs, aim between 300 and 700 words. And you can also like copy and paste an entire web page into a Word doc. Just check the word count on that in case you wanted to check yourself. And then for sentence length, obviously you do want to mix it up, you know, the same skills that you were employing in English class when you're a student. You know, you don't want every sentence to follow the same format, but you do want things to stay brief and have, you know, fewer than 14 words in each sentence. And you'll notice as you're writing that it's a really restrictive length, but just being as concise and to the point as possible is going to be really helpful there. When we think about SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. This is a huge priority right now in our organization and on our website, just in thinking through how we're having college students and other potential applicants find our site. We want people that are going to the web searching for jobs, you know, like jobs after college or jobs in Phoenix or teaching opportunities or, you know, any variety of word combinations. We want them to land at our site and be able to like quickly find the page on our site that's most applicable to them. So if it's a college student looking for how to apply to Teach for America, and they're searching that in Google, most people will search it in Google first. We want them to find the right page first in their search results. So, so the way that we're trying to make that happen, not everything's in our control, obviously, for Google results, but having the items that we have listed here really does help our search engine results. So keywords in the headings and in the text. So keywords being teaching and like the city that you're in, or salary, or college students, or just words that you would expect your readers to be using when they're searching for the content that you're writing about, and putting that in multiple places throughout the text. You will feel like you're being redundant, but that's okay, and that's something that really helps our results and helps people get to the pages that we want them to see. And then keeping things clear and concise is actually helps search engine as well. So articles that are really, that fall within that 300 to 700 word length actually fall higher in Google results. So Google likes when things are concise and to the point, and then also have a mix of different types of text, whether that's headers or visuals throughout the page that you're on. It helps our Google results. And then finally, we want to avoid using terms such as like click here or like this link is available here. We don't want to highlight that. You actually want to be creating the, when you're linking out to different information, you want to highlight the text that you, that is the action, and then link from those words as opposed to having click here. And something that's not listed there, having multiple links out to other pages as well as having like different actions for users to take can also help our SEO. So if you're creating a blog, you can use all of the things that Marie showed before, whether it's the apply and donate links at the bottom or it's the related article links at the bottom, or just having different content for our users to navigate to. That really helps our SEO results. So make it actionable and keep it concise. There's a summary there.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa.
Yeah.
I know we're running a little tight on time, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions, but I just wanted to point out that we have included a writer's checklist here in this presentation. So when we send out the presentation after this call, this is something that you could potentially refer to when you're sitting down to write or edit content on your site, and just sort of look through and say, and just go through the checklist and say, have I defined the audience here? Is the content addressing their needs? Is the headline short and snappy? Is the content under 700 words? It's just like a brief checklist that you can kind of run through to map against what you're working on. And lastly, we just have a quick little guide of resources here that I'll let Teresa kind of run through this before we take questions.
Yep, so using that writer's checklist obviously is going to be helpful, and then also making sure that if you need assistance, whether it's just with editing a blog or creating a page on your site or doing any sort of action on Microsite, to submit it through the request queue, and either myself or Laura Zing or Jamie will be able to assist you in doing so. And you should have steps to how to access that marketing request queue available to you. I'm sure Jamie has shared it before. Also, making use of the factory, which I think all of you guys should also have access to. That's the place where we house all of the approved images that you can use on your pages. Make sure to make active use of that because, again, we want lots of pictures, and we also want to make sure that we're using high-quality pictures, and all the ones on that site are really great. And I believe, is there anything else that I'm leaving out? So Jamie or Maria that you can think of for resources?
There's another question in the chat box.
Okay.
Actually, I lost my internet connection, so if you want to verbalize it, that would be helpful.
Sure. See, I'm having trouble finding a bit chat here. There we go.
Hey, sorry. It's Katie. I can just tell you what my question is.
Oh, awesome.
In looking at the sort of posts that are shared most often, is there any sort of trend data on whether they're first person or third person?
That's a great question. I think just very sort of anecdotally and speaking specifically for Teacher Pop, I'd say absolutely third person posts are shared more often and read more often. And I think we've recently started to move a little bit into the second person as well, because we're really refining our strategy on Teacher Pop to be very targeted to core members and supporting them in the classroom. And so we found that speaking directly to them in the second person has helped sort of build that engagement as well for Teacher Pop.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions, anything folks are wondering about that we can answer? Well, both Teresa and I are here and available, so feel free to, email us anytime if you have any questions, or if after you receive the presentation, if you're looking over it and have questions about any of the slides and want to chat, we are more than happy to and available. And yeah, thanks so much for coming and listening, and it's been great to chat with everyone.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Really
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.